Welcome, everyone. I'm Calvin Crosby, Executive Director for Kaliba. Ann Seaton is here with us as well. She's the Operations Director. It is my profound pleasure to introduce someone who I have the pleasure of saying I hired when she was but a child, and to see her blossom into this wonderful, awesome librarian slash bookseller that she is today, just pleases me to no end. Connie Lynn from Books Inc., it is all yours now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kaliba and Forever, an imprint of Hachette's Bookstore Romance Day celebration. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to give you a little information about Bookstore Romance Day, and then we'll get to our panelists and go from there. Bookstore Romance Day is a day designed for bookstores to celebrate romance fiction. It's books, readers, and writers, and you can find more information on bookstoreromanceday.org. There's going to be a jam-packed list of celebrations today, so hope you guys are ready. And as Calvin said, I'm Connie, your moderator for this event. And we have some amazing authors here joining us: Sajni Patel, Farrah Rochon, and Manda Collins. Sajni Patel was born in vibrant India and raised in the heart of Texas, surrounded by a lot of delicious food and plenty of diversity. Once an MMA fighter, she's now all about puppies and rainbows and tortured love stories. Best-selling author Farrah Rochon hails from a small town just west of New Orleans. She spends most of her time reading, cooking, traveling the world, visiting Walt Disney World, and catching her favorite Broadway shows. Manda Collins spent her teen years wishing she'd been born a couple centuries earlier, preferably in the English countryside. An affinity for a combination of Nancy Drew books and Jane Austen novels led her to her own brand of historical romantic suspense novels. So I've got some questions and a fun lightning round. Well, we should also have time to take some audience questions, and you can submit those using the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. So let's go ahead and hear from our panelists and have them introduce themselves, their preferred pronouns, and tell us what your newest or upcoming book is about. So Sajni, why don't we start with you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sajni Patel, and I wrote The Trouble with Hating You. It's about a woman named Leah who is a biochemical engineer and very set against marriage, and she's thrown into a sort of arranged marriage thing with her family, and all kinds of misunderstandings and chaos and adventures ensue. So The Trouble with Hating You just released in May.
Farrah?
I am Farrah Rochon, she, her pronouns. And my newest book, The Boyfriend Project, it released on June 9th of this year. It seems like forever. It's only been 2 months. And it is the story of young Austin Knight. She is a software tech who has it all except for a man, which is what society has told her that is the only thing she needs to complete this checklist she's been working on. And she thinks that she's found Mr. Right enough, even though he's not Mr. Right for her. She's willing to settle until her sister starts to relay a live tweet that she's reading on Twitter. And my heroine, Samaya, realizes that that date sounds a lot like the date she had with her current boyfriend. And she discovers that he is dating 2 other women. They confront him on that date, and it, of course, is videotaped by someone, goes viral, and the 3 ladies who were dating him decide to band together and spend the next 6 months working on individual projects that they have put to the side while they were looking for relationships. And that is the basis of The Boyfriend Project. But it's also a romance, so of course, Samaya's boyfriend project, there's a little wrinkle in it when she goes to the office and the cute new guy has shown up in the office on his first day on the job. So that's the basis of The Boyfriend Project.
And last but certainly not least, Manda?
Okay, I'm Manda Collins. My next book comes out November 10th. It's called A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem. And it is, in a nutshell, it is a Victorian My Favorite Murder. So the heroine of this book and another lady meet at a dinner party where they're talking about murder and stuff. during their time, and some men start telling them they shouldn't be talking about things like that, and so they decide that they're going to write a newspaper column. And the heroine of this book ends up going to a country house party, and there's a murder, and the detective from Scotland Yard who comes to investigate just happens to be the one whose career they kind of sank with their column. And so, but they end up having to, solve the crime together and fall in love in the process.
All three books are a delight. I already got a chance to read all of them, and they're fabulous, so you should all get them. Have to throw that out there. But since we are celebrating all things romance, I think it seems fitting to start with this question. What's your romance origin story? When did you get into romance as a writer or as a reader? And do you remember any of the titles that you first started reading when you were starting romance? And anyone can jump in.
I know I can start because I kind of know, I remember the very first book. Well, actually, I used to read when I was younger. I read some of my aunt's Penny Jordan and Carol Mortimer Harlequin romances, but I really didn't even know what I was reading at the time because I was really young. But when I was 13 years old, my sister gave me Lavrell Spencer's Separate Beds because I was complaining I had to go like to the hairdresser or something, and I hated going there. And she told me it took so long all the time. I used to have much more hair, I should say. So she gave me the books and I could read it while I was sitting under the hairdryer. And I still remember how my hairdresser told me, I don't know what you're reading, but you need to do it all the time because you haven't complained once. I sat under there for like an hour, and I could have gone 5 hours because I could not put the book down. And it just opened up this whole new world for me. And that was it. That was it. So Lavrell Spencer's Separate Beds, I still read it at least once a year. It remains like just one of my favorites.
That's awesome.
I know for myself, I started to read romance in high school, and I wasn't sure what I was reading. I was just picked up. Actually, okay, so my best friend, she was reading the romance novels from her mom. Her mom had romance novels in the house. And, they weren't like, they weren't very intense. But they were category, they were historical. I remember that. And so they weren't very intense in the love scene area. So I felt like, okay, this is not that big of a deal. I want to read it too. And I would just like read every book that she was reading. And I was also into drawing. So and this was like back in the day, like, you remember those Fabio covers where he was like on all the covers? So these are those kind of covers. And so I would draw all of the covers that I was reading. And then, and I would like write these handwritten letters to the authors, and they would, write me back and give me like swag and bookmarks and things like that. So I was like, oh, this is really cool. So I started to read romance, not because it was a romance or anything like that, just because I saw the cover, it looked interesting. My friend was reading it, and it turned out that I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, I started out, I was reading kind of all at the same time the Sunfire romances that were in the Scholastic book catalog, middle school, like, so when I was 12 or 13. And those were historical. But I also read Jane Austen's Emma, and I was like, I really like this. Instead of thinking, does Jane Austen have any other books I could read? I thought, are there any other books like this? And so I found Regency trads, which were these little short Regency historicals. They're usually very sweet, but I totally got into those. One of the first ones I read was Lord of Dishonor by Edith Layton. And the hero, I just remember this, the hero had 2 different colored eyes, and that was super cool to me. And so after that, I started reading. I did read a lot of Lavrell Spencer, Farrah. I remember Separate Beds and his Corvette. And just after that, it just kind of took off. So I was reading like books for school, but I was also reading romance too at the same time. And so that was it. That was, plus I was reading mysteries. So like it all converged into this weird amalgam of mystery romance.
That's awesome. I think I have an Edith Layton on my bookshelf. I think somebody mentioned it once, and it wasn't in print, so I had to hunt for it and got it used.
Yeah, it was yeah, she was good stuff.
So let's talk about your books. No spoilers for those who haven't read them yet, and if you haven't, you should definitely get them or pre-order it in Manda's case, and get it locally. So shop local, support your local bookstores. So what inspired your current title? What was that, the genesis of the Boyfriend Project or the Trouble of Hating You? Like, was it the
I can say for me it was Twitter. I saw, I've seen, you know, these live tweets over the 9 or 10 years I've been on Twitter. I've seen them all the time. And I was just watching one a few years ago, and it was 2 people on an airplane who were the person who was creepy. It was creepy because it was someone who they didn't know, who was kind of live tweeting them. Apparently they, you know, didn't know each other and had to sit together, and they just live tweeted how, oh, look how cute this is. They're, you know, meeting on the plane, and I was engrossed in it, and I kept refreshing my phone, and I just thought to myself, you know, this is a cool thing to put in the book. And of course, it's not the meet cute in my book. It actually went totally opposite in my book, but that's where I actually got the idea to at least feature that and have that be the jumping off point for it. And then the rest just in my crazy brainstorming way, that's how I came up with the premises. But the spark was Twitter.
I feel like I remember that article about the
It went big. It went big on Twitter. People were talking about it.
Yeah, I remember that.
I think that's such an awesome way. So creative. I wish I could think of something that creative for my book. Well, The Trouble with Hating You, it started out as weirdly women's fiction about the story about Leah. And with Leah, I wanted to create someone that I wish I'd always been. She's very opinionated and just tells you to your face what she's thinking. She doesn't hold back. She's very, will put tradition in its place if it's kind of limiting and hindering women, especially for herself. And then, you know, there's some rough topics as well in the book that also stems from personal experience. So I just wanted to write about these things and get people thinking, especially in our society, especially in the Indian community, from what I've experienced anyway. So I'm not saying this is about all Indian communities, but from what I've experienced, really wanting people to kind of reconsider why they're judging someone or why they're, you know, so quick to jump on the negative bandwagon as soon as they hear something negative about someone, and really trying to get into that person's shoes and realize like how detrimental this type of behavior is. But then Jay came around, and Jay was just, you know, pulling her out and kind of working with her and not giving up on her. And so kind of showing her like there's a lot more to you than what people are saying. So I wanted to create, Leah is very hard and has one experience with the community, and then Jay has a completely opposite side of the community and different experience with the community. So I wanted to bring both positive and negative aspects and see how they can meet together in the middle.
So like I said, mine is kind of my favorite murder set in the Victorian period. I like really got into my favorite murder like not too long after it came out, and I just loved the way that they created a community around talking about, like, they talk about themselves and their own struggles with mental health. But one of the great things about the show is that they talk about some of the worst things that can possibly happen in the world to someone, but they lift up the victims, they lift up the people who have gone through it, and there's this sort of shared community of talking about terrible things. And one of the themes, like in all of my books, has been female friendship. And the friendship between Karen and Georgia is so strong. And I'm always looking for ways in my books to kind of take contemporary things and I'm like, well, how would that have worked in the Victorian era, or how would that have worked in the Regency era? Like, what ways can we look at how they dealt with this? And the thing about the Victorian era is they were super into crime. Like, they had Penny Dreadful magazines and like broadsides that they would put up, and like people would go to hangings as like as entertainment. Like, there was some messed up stuff going on in the Victorian era. So like, I like to look at it and kind of put it through a different lens and kind of see what's going on. And so that was kind of the nutshell of what started me with the book. And I mean, it's definitely not real person fiction, but it's kind of a tribute.
That's so interesting. It's fascinating to see where ideas come from and like what creates this final product of the book, which actually leads me to the next question, since I think Sajni and Manda kind of tackle it a little in their answers. Is one of my favorite things about all three books, and actually romance in general, is how it tackles tough issues and life issues with joy, and it balances that, and how everyone deserves happiness, and essentially how feminist all your three books are. And the Boyfriend Project, we see Samaya tackling being Black and female in a tech field dominated by men. Leah in The Trouble Hating You also works in STEM as a biochemical engineer, but the book calls out all the double standards that exist in Indian cultural expectations, especially around sex and relationships. And Lady Catherine in The Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem is a female journalist writing about crime in Regency England, pushing to inform women about issues that affect their communities in a period where men think of women as delicate creatures. How conscious was writing this element in your story? And was there anything that surprised you when writing your stories or researching some of the things that go on in your story?
I can start. Mine, it was central to the story. I knew when I decided to make Samaya, a software engineer working in STEM, that I had to at least address it. But I really had the opportunity to explore it more than just mention it in a passing, how hard it is to be in this job and not be taken seriously or something. I decided to go much further. And so there are several scenes, pretty heavy scenes, where she is addressing this with Daniel, who also, he is half Korean, half African-American. So she points out that he has these stereotypes that are placed on him, but kind of in the flip side, where people think that he should be this brainiac. So it's both of them facing expectations based on stereotypes that society places on people, people of color in these jobs. So it was very much my intent to bring this to light in the book and have people really, hopefully, understand the pressures that are on Black women specifically, but people of color just having to shoulder their entire race or culture when they're in these fields. So it was definitely something that I wanted to be at the forefront of this book. It's still a rom-com, so don't think that it's all happy. It's definitely still a rom-com, and it's funny, but you know, it hopefully opened people's minds, and those who did not really know, or, you know, I just hope that it created a little more empathy to those who may not have known the struggles that Black women go through in male-dominated and white spaces in particular. So yeah, it was very much intentional. And I thank my publisher for letting me go as far as I did in the book. I think it was important. But also, I don't think it detracts from the story at all. It just makes her a more authentic, rich character. At least I think so.
I agree. It definitely makes it a richer story.
Well, for me, for The Trouble with Hating You, just like Farrah, it was intentional. I wanted this to be the forefront of why Leah is the way she is, how she's treated. And I think it was sort of my way of expressing my concerns and frustrations and pain from what I've experienced by writing it in a book instead, because I'm not the type of person, well, I wasn't back then, I might be a little bit more now to tell you to your face, this is wrong, and you know, this is how you're affecting me and other people. So it was very intentional. I wanted readers to see how it is from the other side, and really why do we even have this behavior in society? And I appreciate my publisher as well, to kind of echo what Farrah was saying. I've had people say, well, Leah is just too rough. She's very unlikable. Why does she have to be that way? Why do you have to have this issue so prominent in the book? And yes, it is a romantic comedy, but it's still, I mean, people in romantic comedy, your characters are still having to deal with the real world issues. And I just wanted to bring something out that I felt was a real world issue, and that needed to be addressed. But at the same time, one of the things that I learned as I was editing, actually not writing it, was, oh, maybe Leah is also presenting some of the issues as a woman. Like, for example, maybe she's treating men a certain way because she doesn't like to be treated that way as a woman. So why is there that double standard? And should she really be treating men the same way that she doesn't appreciate being treated? So there was a little bit of character evolution with her to have her think in a different way. And then one of the best things that I've learned came after the book was published, with readers seeing, I was very nervous. I was very nervous with Indian readers because I feel like, you know, there's so much expectation, and I cannot, and no author should be expected to write the say all of any culture or experience. So I was very nervous with how Indian readers would take my work, if they would feel offended or feel like it's one-sided or whatever the reason. And I was very surprised and happy to hear that so many Indian readers out there were experiencing or had experienced similar issues that Leah has experienced in the book. And for it to touch them on a personal level was just like, that was the entire success of the book, was for a reader to be able to really see themselves in the pages.
So Kate, Lady Catherine, is coming from, she was in an arranged marriage that was very unhappy, and her husband was very controlling. And I intentionally put some of my own frustration with toxic masculinity and rape culture, and just some of the same stuff that is going on now that was going on then, and kind of wanted to show how she could get past that and come into her own and be her own person, and you know, bounce back and fall in love again and be happy again after she had been through all of that. Like, her husband died, fortunately. So she didn't kill him or anything, but yeah. So but I always go into my books with, I mean, I can't take out the feminist part of my brain when I go to write a book. So like, it's always going to be baked in somehow. And I did kind of want to point out some of the the disparities between how upper class and middle class women are treated in the Victorian era and how lower class women are treated. Whereas the upper class women are expected to have a chaperone when they go out and be escorted places. Like there's nobody escorting, you know, a woman who works in a mill. She doesn't have a man helping her get to work every day. And so there's a lot of different things happening in that society between the classes, and I wanted to kind of point out some of that. Obviously, Catherine and her partner Caro in the column are very privileged and wealthy, but I did kind of want to point out some of those differences, as well as show how women can be strong on their own and they don't necessarily have to have a man to, you know, help them get through the world.
And speaking of Carol and some of these side characters, all three books are the beginning of a series. And before I jump into this question, actually somebody at the chat asked if the authors would show their covers. And they're kind of amazing and gorgeous. I actually have a picture of Manda's.
Oh, good, because I don't have one because it's not published yet.
Yeah, it's coming out November 10th.
Yes.
So this is Manda's, all beautifully illustrated.
Yeah, more historicals have the illustrated covers these days. I think it's cool.
It is. It's fun.
And I love how bright all the colors are. Definitely brightens up the bookshelf. But so all three of the beginning of the series, I'm assuming subsequent books featured side characters that we're going to see that we saw in the first book in The Boyfriend Project. There's Taylor in London, In Trouble with Hating You, Pretty and maybe Sana, and Ladies Guide to Mischief and Mayhem, Carol. I'm curious about the writing process for this because I love this feature of romance, seeing familiar characters popping in and out of each other's books and side characters getting their getting their story and their love story. But it's also a lot of details to juggle. When you write that first book, do you anticipate already writing other characters' stories and already seeing their kind of characters, their stories unfold, or do they kind of come later? Like, what's the writing process for you when handling a series like this?
Well, for me, I sold it as a 3-book series. So I knew that each woman would have their own book. I honestly didn't realize that they would be so prominent in the first book. You know, after I wrote the first couple of scenes and fell in love with them, I realized I went back to the drawing board a little bit and created scenes that had more of London and Taylor in the book, in the first book. But it is a lot to juggle. I'm actually working on Taylor's book now, and you do see the women because they're their own support group. You know, they get together every Friday nights for margaritas and tapas, and they discuss their troubles and everything. So that is a feature that you'll see throughout the entire series with them, because this series in particular, I'm the queen of series. I have so many of them. It's kind of just how I write because they work so well in romance. You know, romance readers love to see those characters come back in subsequent books. So I've written a lot of series. I'm comfortable with them because once you create that world, it kind of makes it easy, but then you also have to remember that world that you created, because if you get something wrong, believe me, readers will come and let you know that you got it wrong. So personally for me, I am very organized. I have story Bibles that I call them for each story. I also have a series Bible that I keep, you know, a style sheet with all the characters and places and So my kind of type A personality helps me when it comes to my writing and organizing, because it really does help me to keep things, you know, organized for these series. And I use the find feature in Scrivener and Word a lot, just to make sure I can, you know, look things up and make sure I have it right. So yeah, it's a chore, but I like series, so I'm willing to go through it.
So I am the complete opposite of Farrah, which we know because we've done some panels together. I love spreadsheets and organization in general, but when it comes to writing, it's kind of a free-for-all. So what happens in my writing. I try to create character sheets just to keep my details, you know, consistent. And I love to read series where you get the, you know, the full story of a side character. Personally, I would rather write a series where the same characters continue their story. So my deal was a 2-book deal, and my publisher sort of told me who to write about because I had no intention of writing a second book. I had no ideas. I didn't think any other story was that interesting. So they kind of gave me, you know, the idea to write a particular character's story for the next book. And I really struggled because it was, you know, trying to balance how much the reader knows, but also not assuming they know anything, because I can't assume that they read The Trouble with Hating You before they read the next book, since both are standalone. And so trying to reintroduce the same characters, but in an organic way seems very difficult for me, and I don't understand why, but it is difficult. And then having those same characters pop in and out, but I don't know, for me it kind of feels a little weird. Like, I already know this person, you know, like they're a real person, and it's been a weird process for me, but I did it, so the book is there.
Well, I'm kind of like Farrah. I think in terms of series, but I've just from the beginning I've done trilogies. So because I can't, like, I wouldn't say no to writing like a 6-book series, but by the 3rd book in a trilogy, I'm tired of all those people and I never want to see them again. Well, not never, but so I kind of think when I'm plotting out the trilogy, I think of it as 3 books, and I've got the, you know, the characters slotted for all 3 books. With one of my trilogies, I actually had 2 characters matched up, and I ended up having to switch out the heroines with the heroes for the 2nd and 3rd book, because when I wrote the 1st book, the hero just wrote in the hero's friend, who was going to be the hero of the 2nd book, like, he just came onto the page as a completely different person than I had intended him to be. And so I had to kind of adjust who his heroine was going to be, because his character type was all wrong for the heroine I had him with. And so, like, sometimes, like, you have to kind of adjust for what happens during the writing process. With this one, I only had like 2 heroines in mind, but I did write a 3-book proposal for it, but it was only a 2-book deal. And so I kind of have no idea what's going to happen in the 3rd book. Like, I had an idea, but it's really gonna, the 2nd book and how the side characters happen is going to determine what the 3rd book is going to be, I think. Because sometimes I'm not type A like Farrah, but I'm not like loosey-goosey either. Like, I call myself a plantser, and so, like, I can plot a little bit, but I can't plot too much, because if I plot too much, I feel like I've already written the book in my head and I don't want to write the actual book. And so when that happens, you know, that's bad, because don't want to write the book. And so I have to leave some room for creativity and for my for like plotting on the fly, or plotting to happen organically while I'm writing it. Otherwise I get frustrated with the process, and I don't like to be frustrated. But it is better to have like a roadmap, kind of where you know where you're going, because I don't like writing myself into corners either. And so that just wastes a lot of time, and I don't like to waste time either. So yeah, so just kind of a little bit of both. I don't like to be tied down, but I also don't like to not know where I'm going. I like to have a map.
That's interesting. It's cool to see kind of the behind the scenes of how the series developed, because I mean, I love that about romance. It's just reading about each of the characters. So I have a question for folks who are new to romance. So we might have some participants or people who stumble upon this podcast or video later, new to romance. Like, what's one thing you want them to know about the genre, or like Romancelandia in general? Because romance has so many stereotypes. People think like guilty pleasure, or like it's looked down upon. So what's kind of one thing, if there was one thing you can kind of let everyone know about romance in general, like what would that be?
For me, for one thing, I don't believe in guilty pleasures. Anything that gives you pleasure is like, don't feel guilty about it. So that's with everything in life, not just reading. But if I were, to be approached by someone who's brand new to the genre, the one thing I would want them to know is that it is so broad and vast that there's something for everyone. So if they're a sci-fi reader, you can find a sci-fi romance, or a suspense reader, you will find romantic suspense. It's one of those genres where there are even a few romantic horrors. There's something for everyone. So that's one thing I would like them, to know. Don't worry about the stereotypes that you've heard about romance. Just look around until you find something that fits your, what you like.
I would say something along similar lines, that romance is very diverse. You have your different genres, you have your different backgrounds of characters, and you have your levels of depth in the story. If you want something that's really serious, really tackles different issues in society, tackles friendships, family, whatever it is, or if you want something that's a very like lighthearted or quick read, everything in between. You have short romances, category romances. You have the long romances, like the sci-fi romances can be like, 8 or 9 books and could be 100,000 words in there. So it's so diverse that you really can't find what you want and really find yourself in a book. You can really find yourself as a character, yourself as your ethnicity, yourself as a situation, or something that you can really escape into.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. It's also, you don't have to like judge it by the covers, and you don't have to feel guilty about the covers. There are different kinds of covers, different kinds of romances, and really there's good writing in every subgenre. So, there's good sci-fi, bad sci-fi. There's no one book for every person. And so, not everybody's gonna like my book. Not everybody's gonna like Farrah's book. And it's just a matter of finding what you like in this vast genre. And if you read a couple and you don't like them, just try a different one. Maybe you will like a different subgenre. Maybe you will like a different author. Like, there are so many different kinds of writing in romance. And like, I'm a voice reader, so I'll read like a few pages of a book, and their voice, like, it sounds woo-woo, but it's like either their voice talks to me or it doesn't, and like it clicks with me or it doesn't. And so like that's not going to happen with every book. And some books, some writers are really like have a great story, but maybe their prose isn't like super flowing and beautiful. Like I don't happen to think mine is super flowing and beautiful. I'm a plot writer. But there's a different kind of book out there. So whatever kind of books you like, you're going to be able to find the kind of books you like in romance, just because they're so, it's like any other kind of fiction.
Thank you for all that. Just want to remind people that you can ask questions for our panelists in the Q&A button below. And while you're thinking up questions, I have a fun lightning round for all three. Some fun questions. So first one, favorite romance trope?
Enemies to
There's a
love.
convenience.
That one too. See, I can't do it.
I didn't catch that one. What did Manda?
Marriage of convenience.
Oh, yes.
Combine them. Enemies that turn to lovers because they have to get into a marriage of convenience.
That could be someone's next book.
Oh my gosh, you're asking me the wrong question. I am not a trope person. I don't ever look at tropes and think I want to read that. I just think of the story. But I guess if I had to say that, what's that trope where the friends, you like your friend's brother or something like that? Yeah.
Best friend's brother.
That
Or
totally
sibling.
works with the other two
Brother's
tropes.
Brother's best friend, yeah.
It's a very attractive trope.
It totally works with the other two tropes that I can take all three of them in one book and I would be like in heaven.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, books that like have multiple tropes are like, they're golden.
Catnip, yes.
I like some fake dating. Fake
Yeah.
Oh, I've got a book
Oh,
for you.
yes.
What's your favorite scene in a romance to write? So like the almost kiss, the meet cute, the romantic gestures, sexy times, etc.
I love the ones that where they're getting to know each other and the really great banter comes out. You know, those sweet scenes that's kind of, people call the middle of a book a sagging middle, but for me, that's where the couple is falling in love. And that's the ones that I love to write, where their personalities really get to come out and they're learning each other. So those scenes.
I like the first touches, like the hand on the lower back or pulling the hair away. Sounds cheesy, but I can't think of any great ones off the top of my head. But I like the the first touches where they've already connected on a personal level, intellectual level, or respect level, and now they're starting to feel the spark with the slightest touch. I love those parts.
It's like that scene in I don't know if you guys watched the Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley. The hand.
Yeah.
There was that scene where they focus on the hand, on Darcy's hand.
Oh yeah.
Never any movie ever. I love it.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, I like banter, but I also like those moments when they've been getting along and then they just kind of have like this moment, they just don't get each other, and so they like just get really frustrated and like just and like I like writing those moments where it's just like they're just not getting it, and so they're trying to figure out like what is wrong with you, like why are you this way, and like those kind of I can't even describe it. I don't even have words.
You said, ugh, that describes it right there. We all know.
Yes. Romance books that you think everyone should read, besides your own. Everyone should read the books mentioned today.
True. Oh gosh. I will say Pinted Dunn's new book, it's actually a YA called Dating Makes Perfect. I loved it. So that's coming up. It's coming up in, I think, next month. Read it.
I really like the kiss quotients. I think it was just, it had a lot of depth to it. with the character and with the issues that she has that a lot of people may not have a lot of insight into, but is also like a very fluid, easy read. So I really like that book. I think a lot of people should read that if they haven't already.
I've been preaching lately about Sherry Thomas's Ravishing the Heiress. And it's one of those books, like we were talking about, that has like multiple tropes. So it's friends to lovers, it's marriage of convenience, it's just, Sherry Thomas is just an exquisite writer. She takes your heart out, she breaks it, she stomps on it, and then puts it all back together again by the end. And it is just like, if you haven't read Sherry Thomas, you just need to pick up one of her books. She's got the Lady Sherlock Mystery series too. She's just amazing.
All right, so another question we have the audience. Can you give a flame rating to each of your books, with 1 flame being tamest and 5 being the most steamy?
I would say mine is a 2. I have the kiss and some innuendos, but I have close scene. I personally don't feel comfortable. I mean, I like to read it, but I don't feel comfortable writing the steamier things because I know my brother's going to read it and my cousins are going to read it, and it's very awkward. So a 2.
So if Sanji's giving, okay, you're giving yours a 2, because I was going to say a 3 for mine, but mine are definitely on the page, and there's like stuff that happens. So when it comes to the whole heating, it's like one person's 3, maybe another person's 4. So maybe a 3.5. Also depends on what you read. So
yeah,
I'm going to say a solid 3.5 for me.
Yeah, I mean, mine is definitely open door, but there's only one scene, like, but yeah, there's definitely stuff. It's not a 5 and it's not a 1, but it's hard to judge, because like, what are you, you know it when you see it, but it just, I don't know. It's not like flaming. It's not like,
Connie, you read them, so why don't you?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I feel like it's hard because it really depends. Like, if 5's like erotica,
Yeah.
then yeah, I think Manda's would probably be 2.5, maybe.
Yeah, it's not like,
I don't know. It's just hard to. It's unless I feel like with ratings, you have to have something else to compare it to.
Yeah.
All right. Another audience question: what forthcoming romance books publishing this year are you excited about?
I can mention one. It's kind of romantic women's fiction. It's publishing, I think, in August or September, but it's by Sharina Harris, and it's called Judge's Girls. So it's kind of, I would say, probably more women's fiction with some romantic elements in it, but it's very rich. It's timely, about a judge who dies and leaves his house to his Black daughter, but the caveat is that his white wife, who he left her mom for, has to get to stay in the house. So it's them having to finally, mend their differences and for his sake. So it, like I said, it's a very rich story, and there's romance in it, but I think I'm excited about it. I'm really excited about it. So
I'm excited about, I had to look up the author's name, but How to Fail at Flirting
Oh,
by Denise Williams. It just sounds like, she's trying to save her her business, her department. So it just sounds like one of those really fun romantic comedies where you're going to have a lot of tension, but you're also going to have a lot of misunderstandings and probably getting caught doing things you shouldn't be getting caught doing. So I'm looking forward to that book.
I really do not know what's coming out this year. Like, it's been one of those years. It's just when something comes out, I get really excited, but I don't know what is happening. I know that there's a couple of romance writers who have turned suspense. Alyssa Cole has a suspense coming out. I can't think of the name of it.
When No One Is Watching.
Yeah. Yes, I'm looking forward to that. And Sherry Thomas has a new mystery coming. Murder on Cold Street, I think. Honestly, it's just one of those, like, I have no idea what's happening this year. So
Understandable. 2020 seems like a decade.
Yes, it really is.
And then I have to plug You Had Me at Ola by Alexis Daria, which just came out. Telenova soap stars, amazing swoony romance, kind of behind the scenes look at how soap operas are made. Ugh, so good. And last question from the audience. Did any of the authors go through a Barbara Cartland phase, or are y'all too darn young?
I have about 20 of them on the shelf and have never read them. I went through a Barbara Cartland buying phase where someone told me, you have to read her books. And I bought a ton of them like when I was in college, and they're still sitting on the shelf with about 1,000 other books at my parents' house. And I will eventually go and get them. Eventually, Dad. Yeah.
I read a few. I don't really remember them. I do remember she used a lot of ellipses. So I ... love ... you ... But yeah, like I love her whole scene, like her whole persona and the little dog and the feather boas and the pink parlor. Like, she is what I aspire to. I don't think I'm ever gonna reach those heights, but it's pretty impressive, I have to say.
So before we end it for today, I was gonna ask final question: where can our participants find you on social media or online?
I'm on all of them. Instagram is probably the safest place to find me these days. It's where I'm the most fun. But if you go on my website, I have my social media buttons right up there. But if you just look up Farrah Rochon on any platform except for TikTok, because I'm not allowed, according to my niece. So you won't find me on TikTok, but you will find me everywhere else.
And I am on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Sajni Patel Books.
And I'm on most of them. If you don't want a lot of politics, maybe don't follow me on Twitter. But Instagram is mostly pet pics and bookstagram stuff. And it's either author Manda Collins or Manda Collins author. I can't remember which one, but if you look up Manda Collins, you should be able to find me.
All right. Well, thank you, Farrah, Sajni, and Manda for hanging out with us today. You can find The Boyfriend Project and The Trouble with Hating You out now at your indie bookstores, and you can pre-order The Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem, and it's coming out November 10th, 2020. Thank you for joining us today for Bookstore Romance Day, everyone. And I hope you have fun celebrating today.
Thank you, everyone.